5-year-old boy fell into the open-air gorilla compound at Jersey's Wildlife Preservation Trust yesterday afternoon. Lee Van Merrick, on holiday in the island with his family, lost his balance while on the wall and fractured his skull and an arm in the fall. As he lay unconscious, the huge silverback male gorilla Yambo appeared to guard him.
That news story and the pictures that went with it caught the imagination of the world. It took just 1 minute of amateur videotape for this gentle giant to destroy the myth of the gorilla as a savage, aggressive animal. A myth which goes back to the mid-16th century and which was followed about 100 years later by an account given by a Frenchman, Paul du Chaillu, believed to be the first white man to face a living adult gorilla in its natural surroundings. Monsieur du Chaillu described his encounter with a hellish dream creature of that hideous order, half man, half beast. Hollywood, of course, perpetuated the myth with King Kong in the 30s. And Yambo dispelled it one summer Sunday in 1986. Yambo arrived in Jersey in 1972. He was met by zoo founder Gerald Durrell. He brought with him the director of the Swiss Zoo, where he was born.
We bred our first gorilla in '59, and this was Goma. She was not accepted by her mother, and so we had to raise her in our house. She was our first daughter. We had only boys before.
How long was she in the house with you?
Oh, we had her in the house for about 2 years, and then we got, when she was 1 year old, we got a little gorilla of about the same age, and we brought those then, after having them both in our house, to the ape house.
Was your first one, was it? Was it the first occasion that the gorillas had been bred in captivity?
It was the first in Europe, the second in the world.
Goma was in fact a sister to Yambo, but the mother who so affectionately reared her male offspring had wanted nothing to do with her firstborn. So now Yambo was in the position of starting his own family. He set up house with Nandi and Napongo, 2 breeding females, in the new, specially designed Bryan Park complex in Jersey. At this age, he was now 11, his size and that of his mates was very similar. In the minds of the public, the aggressive myth persisted.
They are really peaceful animals, and we saw it this morning when we put together the first time these 2 females with the new male, with Yambo. And they were so peaceful and nice, and as I heard, about 2 hours later they already mated.
Famous faces from the naturalist world gathered for the official opening of the gorilla's new home by the late David Niven and his wife.
With great pleasure, I'm going to step down and make over something much prettier than I am, who's going to pull the plug and declare the lady gorillas open for business. Thank you.
From July 1973, Yambo's Jersey babies started arriving quite regularly. His first 6 were hand-reared, as by and large at that time, any adult gorillas in zoos had been caught in the wild as infants. They therefore had no idea about mating, giving birth, or rearing their offspring. Contrary to popular belief, these things didn't come naturally. Yambo himself, of course, was one notable exception. He was the first male gorilla in the world to be born in captivity, and to be mother-reared. Gerald Durrell was at this time making The Stationary Ark, a 13-part television series set entirely at Jersey Zoo, which took a detailed look at the care and maintenance of animals in captivity. It's been screened worldwide, and in fact is still being shown in some corner of the earth. It was a great privilege to be at the zoo in those days, and to have young gorillas interact with you socially, so to speak. The hand-rearing continued over a period of time, the adult females learning a little bit more through each birth. One of them, though, rejected her first 3, Mamsi, Tatu, and Kumba. Napongo got a little bit better each time, but as zoo staff will tell you, she improved, but still failed. More famous faces from all over the world, who turned out to have secret longings for involvement with so-called wild animals, would turn up quietly at Les Aigles Manor, the headquarters of what is officially called the Jersey Wildlife Preservation Trust. Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne is the patron of the trust, and she was lucky enough on one visit to be in the gardens when all 6 of the hand-reared youngsters were out. They were subsequently sent away from the island for breeding or in exchange, a couple to London, one as far away as Oklahoma. The Jersey group was very helpful to a particular young gorilla from London, Salome, who came here one summer to learn to be a gorilla. It sounds strange, but she had been hand-reared and never reprimanded, and she was incredibly antisocial. The well-adjusted youngsters here were now having their entire future as a family together planned in a totally new environment.
Firstly, the gorillas are a very social animal, and thanks to our tremendous success of breeding them now, we find ourselves in a position to have a family group of them. And in order for them to really act as a social family group and be able to get back some of our hand-reared animals with the parents, we need a type of environment which this new complex will give us. A large area where they can benefit from the interactions of a normal social group. I think it's going to be one of the most successful exhibits in the zoo world as far as gorillas are concerned, but also, which is far more important, it's going to contribute really materially to the long term of the species in captivity by having this type of environment.
When the time came to move the group as a family, medical teams, or veterinary teams, from both sides of the Atlantic worked together, as did the world's camera teams. In order to safeguard both animals and humans, the adult gorillas were given tranquilizing darts. The move would provide the ideal opportunity for extensive examination of the primates in unhurried and controlled conditions. To lessen any tension for the animals, experts recommend anesthesia. Yambo's name comes from the Swahili word for good morning, and it's pronounced the way it is because he was born in Switzerland. But it wasn't a particularly good morning for him one day in May 1981. At birth, he'd weighed just 4 pounds. Even when he was 2, he was a bit of a wimp, and light for his age. Now, aged 20, it was to take 7 men to carry him just a few feet. What awaited Yambo at the other end of his journey across the parkland was not the immediate joy of being able to play in the great outdoors. First, he had to undergo the ministrations of Dr. Stephen Seeger from the United States National Institute of Health, whose speciality is reproduction in animals.
Having transferred Yambo to his new accommodation, the next thing we have to do is to maintain him under anesthesia. To do this, we are going to intubate him. This involves deepening him first of all with a gaseous anesthetic, then passing the endotracheal tube, and after that we have much better control over general anesthesia for as long as we need to do so. We need to check that he's nicely relaxed before we start to take measurements. It's always important when you have the opportunity like this with a large animal and these ties to gather what data one can, and measurements are certainly an interesting feature. The purpose of this stage of the operation is to obtain semen samples from Yambo to compare his fertility with that of many gorillas around the world, particularly in America, where fertility is not as high as he seems to demonstrate. And so this was a good opportunity to compare his fertility with that of others. And in fact, Dr. Seeger is a specialist from America who has come in especially for this purpose. The whole procedure and its many different aspects occupied quite a long period of time and gave us a chance to examine many other details of this animal, who was in fact in very good health at the time, to take measurements of his limbs, for instance, so that we could establish his size in relationship to his weight. We were also interested in how his teeth were progressing. He was a 20-year-old animal, and quite often dental problems do arise in animals in captivity. Here we are cleaning his teeth. In fact, they were in very good condition and only needed a very superficial treatment, suggesting that his diet in captivity must be ideal. Also, we were taking blood samples because this being a healthy animal at the time, the data we can obtain by taking blood tests at this stage are very useful to compare with animals from which we take blood samples when they are sick. We can't always compare a gorilla's blood directly with human and expect the values to be the same, so we need some useful comparisons between sick animals and healthy ones. So obtaining blood samples is important.
Now, the people who are looking at him from anesthesia, they've got to stay in here till he's up walking around. Do you understand that? I mean, right in the pen. There's nothing to be done. The minute you see him start to rise, you get out there, don't you get in?
And obviously, the medical team heeded the advice of Dr. Steger. It was a very solitary Yambo who came round in the comfort of his new home. Whether he appreciated what he'd just done isn't known.
I've been fascinated by the gorilla and the thought of the gorilla disappearing by the end of the century, but certainly it looks like the mountain gorilla will do so. I was extremely interested. We had an international meeting in Atlanta, in Georgia, last fall, about male infertility in the gorilla, and the great problems with male infertility, particularly in the gorilla. And Jeremy Madison, the director of the Jersey Wildlife Trust, was there. And I was over here actually last July, and we first talked about when we were moving Yambo and the other females to the new compound, about the possibility of collecting semen from Yambo and freezing it for insemination in other breeding groups of gorillas where maybe the male wasn't fertile or he was immature or just wasn't breeding. Say you've one of the finest breeding gorillas in the world. I'm not sure that if there's any other gorilla in the world has had 11 or 9 known and possibly 11 offspring produced. So Yambo was a world beater in that context, besides being a very beautiful gorilla, you know. And I think this is one of the things we've got to remember, that without breeding these species in captivity, they're just not going to survive, because the habitat destruction is happening so quickly that wildlife, and as we know it today in Africa, is to all intents and purposes doomed. And it's to countries and to zoos like the Jersey Wildlife Trust, the breeding of these endangered and wonderful animals lies still there. Many people have said to me, well, so what if the gorilla becomes extinct? You know what I mean? Well, then you've got to say, well, where do you stop? You know what I mean? If you look at the animals that have become extinct in this century, in fact, this last 50 years, I mean, of all the animals that have become extinct for the last 10,000 years, a tremendous percentage of them have become extinct this last 50 years. So where do we draw